I hope you all had a good break and had an opportunity to devour some of the lunch. We have, don't feel guilty, we've donated any of the leftovers to the students. So, this afternoon's presentations, we've got two presentations and then we have our panel session. The session this afternoon, the first session, is around research translation. And it's my great pleasure to introduce Professor Craig Bailey, who's a former UniSQ Head of School and Dean of School of Agriculture and Environmental Science. He's now moved across to GRDC and he's the General Manager for Applied RD&E at GRDC. Please join me in welcoming Craig, and he'll give us a presentation. There will be some time for questions afterwards. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you, Gavin, and a pleasure to be here this afternoon, maybe wearing some different colours, but nonetheless, pleased to be here. I thought it would be a great opportunity today to talk a bit about our new research plan. So this is GRDC's new research plan, which is freshly minted. It's only a few months now, but there's obviously been a lot of work preceding that in terms of the making. So I've recently gone across into GRDC as the General Manager of Applied Research Development Extension. I'll talk a little bit this afternoon about the plan and kind of what informs some of the plan and the development of it, and also some of the things that excite us around research investment. Talk a little bit about the research group that I lead at the moment, and again, hopefully we can explore this a bit more. So I think, I wanted to start by just reflecting here a little bit by, the size of the grains industry. And you can see there that, we've got, by itself, the grains industry is a large industry. GRDC is the largest research and development corporation. So there's 15 research and development corporations in Australia, and GRDC is the largest of all of those. If you look at our production, we as a grains industry produce about 23% of the total value in agriculture. So again, it just gives you a sense of the enormity of what it is we do in terms of the grains industry, and of course what you guys do as researchers in broadacre cropping. So I'm just going to turn a little bit here because, so I guess the one thing that I wanted to also express is the purpose of GRDC is really about investing in research, development and extension. And the key part of that is really about creating enduring profitability for our farmers, okay? So, that's why we exist. We receive a levy from our growers, which is matched by federal funds. We invest that money for the good of the industry, and we're very much targeted around increasing the profitability for our stakeholders. You might also see some other keywords there. We aspire to be recognised globally as leaders in innovation, so that's really important that the work that we do is cutting edge and transformative. We look to partner with the best and the brightest, and obviously here's a good opportunity. And what we're trying to do is deliver world-class innovation, and as I said before, we're now embarking on a new 5-year plan, and it seeks to offer new solutions, so things that we haven't done before is what we're trying to achieve through this new plan. Some of the major trends that happen globally also inform, the development of this new plan. So it's not only just what's happening on the ground out in the Darling Downs or maybe in southern New South Wales or Victoria or Western Australia. The grains industry is quite broad, as you know, but it's also how these mega trends play out and the sort of influences it has on our market. We know that there's a growing population and there's pressures to feed a growing population. There's increasing costs which drive, our production. There's pressures around sustainability, climate change. All of those things conspire to have some influence on what it is we do within this sector, and therefore we've developed a plan which is responsive to those sorts of drivers. And some of those things creates opportunities for us, but they also create some challenges for us along the way as well. So our new plan, and again this was only launched in July. For those in GRDC, and there's a few people here today, this seems like, 4 months is kind of a bit like dog years, where it's been a long time since we've been working on this. And I might add that a lot of it was predating me, so it's a pleasure to be able to present the work that a lot of others have actually done and put a lot of effort into. But we're building off 30 years of RD&E, so we're not just starting this from scratch. We're building off a really, really good base. One of the things that works in our favour as an RDC is the system of our research funding and investment is globally recognised. It's the envy of the world. If you go to anywhere around the world and you talk to other countries, the way we invest in agriculture within this country is highly regarded. It's an opportunity to maintain the capacity that we've got, but it's also a good opportunity to embrace new opportunities, as I said, and build new capability and capacity. And one of the standout features is that traditionally our R&D spend has been around the $180 million per annum. This new plan allows us to lift that significantly to around $230 million per annum. So it's a big, big business. Some of the other things that are new in terms of the new plan is we've got increased risk appetite, so we are looking for investments that are a little bit more edgy. Yes, we will invest in the sort of things that we have invested in the past, which create good value for our stakeholders. But obviously with a bit more money, it gives us an opportunity to explore some new things as well. And so we're looking for those sorts of edgy type investments as well. Our research partners are changing. Traditionally, where we've invested and the people we've invested, yes, we'd like to still invest with those people. But we're also taking a different view that we might invest with partners who can actually take something to market for us as well as do the fundamental research. And so there's some great examples where we might be investing with technology companies who already have the dealer and distribution network and the pipeline to actually take a fundamental piece of technology into a product and then deliver that out into the market, and can actually turn that on so that it's distributed across all of Australia and maybe then release it globally as well. So again, that brings great opportunities. As I mentioned before, a large uplift gives us some opportunities to spend some money where we haven't spent it before. Blue sky research is quite fundamental to this new venture, and also growing markets and creating new value that we haven't realised in the past. So again, some new territory for us. This slide is a really nice snapshot of what we're now doing in terms of the new plan. So we've got 4 key pillars. Harnessing the potential that's already in the farming system as it stands. We know that there's a yield gap between what we can actually produce and what's potentially achievable. And so investing in those areas, which is where we've invested in the past, but also reaching for new frontiers. So again, going beyond where that potential is at the moment and exploiting new things that we've never done before. Growing markets and capturing value, I mentioned that already. Thriving for future generations. So thinking about the sustainability aspect of what it is that we do and make sure that that's embedded in all of our research and all of our investments. The focus areas you can see on this slide represent sort of the main sort of research that we're doing. So again, the traditional sort of crop, pests, weeds and diseases type area, but then investing in new technologies and, as I said, other parts that we've never invested in before or very limited. And this is a really good example of what the difference is between what we've done in the past and what we're now doing. We've invested around $800 million over the last plan, and this next 5 years we're going to invest something like $1.3 billion. So again, that's a really large amount of money. And it's not about the spend or the investment that's important, it's about the opportunities that it's created, and that's really what's focusing us at the moment is a large uplift in terms of research investment takes a lot of work, obviously, to stand up new investments, but it's also about standing up investments that are actually going to make a real impact. Some of the enablers, which we haven't invested in before, we will invest a lot more in. As I said before, the traditional things that we've invested, we'll still invest in those, but it's this new frontiers piece which is quite different to what we've done. And again, that creates the opportunity for change. So we've arrived at this point, and I guess, as I said, there's already a few things that are embedded in our thinking. We need to think beyond just the Australian landscape. So can we get technology from around the world? Can we partner with other institutions around the world to exploit that next level of development that we haven't realised to date? Looking at global partners in that process. So again, non-traditional partners that have never worked with us in the past. We've been to the US just recently, had discussions with Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, Corteva, Bayer. We've got an existing agreement with Bayer, John Deere, Case New Holland, so large multinational parties that create a different opportunity. Not to say that we won't invest in those areas that we have, but just bringing new players into the mix that we've never sort of done a lot of work with. When we invest in our research, what we do is we look across where the value is created. So we don't just spread this like Vegemite across the whole plate. What we do is we look at various areas of where there's opportunities, and we regard that as a value pool, and then that value pool informs the amount of investment that we make. So you can see here that across all of those pillars, there are different amounts of money that we'll invest in, and that's relative to the value pool that it actually creates. So, and you can see that, we start a new plan. A large amount of that is already committed through, investments that are coming through the pipeline, but there's certainly a bit of capacity there for growth as well. I thought it might be useful to just reflect on the way we normally do business is we stand up investments, and research partners will normally respond through a request for tender, but we also do strategic partnerships, and previously those sort of partnerships were referred to as bilaterals. These days we don't do that so much, but we look for opportunities where we've got alignment between what a research provider might want to do and what we might want to do. Where there's an opportunity for them to invest a large amount of money in something that they're quite committed to, we can get on board and actually join that cause. And so there's these 5 principles which we sort of hold close in terms of what we would regard as a strategic partnership. So the first one is really about outcomes driven. So it's where we've got a partner that's fairly ambitious in what they want to try and achieve, and there's common goals and common strategy for us to work together. Governance. So there's an opportunity for us to be more agile in the development, maybe a bit more co-design focused, as opposed to a transactional type relationship. Certainly leadership. What we're looking for is partners that want to lead in areas and with conviction, so maintain that momentum, be quite determined in actually becoming the best in what they actually do. And in fact, we've made investments in the past where we've grown research groups from an emerging research group into a Era 5 research group. So they're the opportunities when we've got that sort of alignment in purpose. Collaboration. Obviously what we're looking for is collaboration to add value and outcomes that are not likely to occur the way we would normally do business. So this is the 1 + 1 = 3, 4 or 5. So just to sort of focus a little bit on home ground, as I said before, my business group is the Applied Research Development Extension Group. Within our group, and there's some people here today, we've got 2 main research programs, sustainable cropping systems, which includes agronomy and soils, crop protection, which includes the traditional pest, weeds and diseases. And the other piece, which is really important to what we do, is the grower stakeholder engagement piece. And so we have carriage of that in the north, and Gillian Meppin's here in the audience, and her territory is all of Queensland and New South Wales, so that's what we regard as our northern region. Our south, which is Tasmania, Victoria and South Australia, and obviously our western region, which is Western Australia. So our remit is all across the country, and that group is really responsible for that interface between our growers and our stakeholders, which is where we get ideation, where we get knowledge transfer and extension as well. Just to give you a sense of the size of the group, there's 32 staff in our group. We've got about $360 million in contracted R&D and nearly $400 million in the pipeline. So it's a very large engine to drive, and a lot of people working quite hard to try and make this all happen. Within GRDC, we've got 2 other business groups. We've got the Genetic Technologies and Biosecurity Group, and Juan Jutner leads that group. And we've also got Strategy and Business Development led by Ron Osmond. So it just gives you a bit of a flavour of who I am and what I do within GRDC relative to some of the other people. I was going to very quickly just go through some of the things that are informing our investments, and as I said before, sustainability underpins a lot of what we do. So not only do we need to produce more with less, but we've got to do that more sustainably. And so sustainability is embedded in a lot of what we invest in, and we are actually making particular investments in sustainability. Some colleagues at the back were chuckling around low emissions intensity farming systems, a major investment which we're trying to get through the system at the moment. But again, it's just to highlight that that's a sort of a common piece now, that it's embedded in most of what we do, if not all of what we do. I mentioned before the grower interface, which is mainly through our grower and stakeholder engagement piece. But across the country, we have a national grower network where we have grower groups that we engage with. Those grower groups help feed ideas into the system, which we ideate from, which we develop into investments. Those investments will go through the system into procurements, which will become live projects. And so that's one way that we might ideate and commission new work. We also have an opportunity for a small investment where we don't go through a traditional investment process through our panels, where our teams can actually stand up small projects to then inform the sort of local needs that a grower might have. So it's where it's more of a bespoke project, less strategic, less long-term. It allows growers to unpick and unravel, if you like, some of the key principles of a new concept and how they might adopt something. And one of the things that we are looking to do at the moment is develop our capacity in the north. So we've made some investments to try and build some capacity around some service providers, but we're certainly looking to reach out to other people in this room, the universities, state agencies, in terms of developing that capacity and building that capacity. This is a different type of investment that we've made, and it's called RiskWise. Again, the sort of things that we're looking to do is invest in areas where we can get impact. And so RiskWise really embraces a participatory action research approach. It's where we look at decisions on farm through a risk management framework. And so the idea is that these grower groups, and we've got something like 25, 26 grower groups around the country, essentially identify the issues that are important to them, and it's about the trade-off between the risk and the reward. So there's multiple options that a farmer can pick in terms of what they do on farm. What we're trying to do is work with these groups so they understand that risk-reward play-off, and so they can make more informed decisions going forward. So this is a very new project. It's an opportunity for us to start to feed that initiative with other things as we go along. The focus at the moment is around nitrogen management, which is really just to seed the concept and seed the ideas going forward. But the idea is that these groups will actually identify their own issues and will tackle their own issues through that investment. One of the other things that I also wanted to mention was this New Frontiers piece, and again, investing in things that perhaps we wouldn't have normally done. And so we've got a large investment in autonomy and automation at the moment. And so this is where we are dividing up the investment a number of different ways. Firstly, it's about building the capacity within the industry to be able to take the technology as it's being developed. Secondly, it's been engaging with manufacturers to fast track some of the technologies that are already in that pipeline. And thirdly, it's about envisioning what the future might look like on farm and being able to invest in technologies in a pathway to full autonomy on farm. And so this is a great one where we're investing with traditional partners, universities and grower groups, but we're also starting to invest with technology providers as well and some of the large manufacturers. And so this is a way that we can get access to technology that we wouldn't normally get access to. We could get access to technology that perhaps we would get access to, but we can purpose it for our needs, and we can accelerate what farmers can get access to in the short term. So, and leverage, large amounts of intellectual property that we wouldn't normally have access to. So a great initiative, a great example of a non-traditional way in which we might invest to get an outcome for the industry. The final example that I wanted to just mention was we have our own VC fund. And so again, one of the challenges that we've got in agriculture is in the ag tech startup domain, there is a lack of capital. And so what GRDC has started is its own venture capital fund as pre-seed funding to get a start to these businesses. Some of the businesses and the logos on that screen are obviously the ones that we've invested in. And through the GRDC brand and through the respect of what we do, those companies have gone on to leverage a small amount of money that we might have invested to get a large amount of money to continue that business. So there are businesses up there on that slide that I know that we've put a modest amount of money into and have raised over $100 million in venture capital out of the US. Our leverage on this has been outstanding. For every dollar we put in, our leverage has been something like 27 times. So again, a different way of getting an outcome, but it allows us to do these sorts of novel things in the new plan. So conscious of time, and just wanted to leave it there. I guess this afternoon was really just a good opportunity to give you guys an understanding of the sort of things that GRDC is doing over the next 5 years. We are really keen to talk about the opportunities, particularly through BACI, and what BACI is trying to achieve into the future and where we might be able to get some alignment. As I said, the key principles around strategic partnerships are probably the starting piece, and it's just a good opportunity to keep a conversation going. Thanks, Gavin.
Thanks very much, Craig. Do we have any questions from the audience? No? So, Craig, with these new strategic partnerships, what's the approach to how they're going to be developed? Are they put a business case? Are they a general call? How are they going to be put in place?
We with our traditional partners, we will look for opportunities where they might come to us with something they're very determined to do. So I guess we field those sorts of inquiries all the time, and I think what's really important for us is that we can see a clear purpose for what they're trying to do. We can see intent to invest the money regardless of whether we would be there or not. But we see opportunity to leverage and we see opportunity to get involved. So these are quite unique, but I think given that we're here at a forum around a strategic partnership with the Queensland Government, it's just worthwhile to sort of put on the table that we are doing a number of these sorts of things, and it'd be useful to have a conversation at some point.
Great. Yeah, we've got a question up the back.
Thank you, Greg. Zane from CSRO here. Thank you for sharing your 5-year plan. Just wondering, behind the plan, what's your directionality around measuring impact behind your plan and framing your impact return on investment? What are the dimensions you're thinking about? What's the directionality of that?
Yeah, so with the plan comes a number of corporate initiatives, and we've got corporate initiatives around stakeholder engagement, which includes extension and adoption. So what we will follow up with in terms of the release of the plan is a monitoring and evaluation framework to go through and monitor and evaluate the plan over the life. So that's embedded in our intent. I guess there are some sort of things that we're looking for is that we're looking for the return on investment, those sorts of things. We're looking for increased productivity growth consistent with what we've done in the past. So there are a number of KPIs that are embedded in the plan, and of course if you want to get on the GRDC website, there's a link to our plan, and it has the key performance indicators that we're driving towards as well.
Another question, Mona?
Yeah, being a farmer and very interested in research, and we've seen research carried out. How's the process go when projects have been deemed reached their end? Who makes those decisions? Because in the past, I've sort of seen things that have been canned and just feel as though there's not enough negotiation with farmers and things. So what's the process? Because in the last 5 years, our Northern panel have had no input into that. So I know things can always change and we can learn from mistakes, but what's the process of when a project is deemed, how's that determined?
Yeah, I mean, if the project's met its original objectives and we've planned to exit because that's matured, then that's the life of the project. It's important to communicate that, but more often than not, if it's a fairly large program of work, we'll do an independent review of the work and we'll identify what pieces were done and achieved successfully and what are the new pieces that need to be done. We've got a large investment at the moment that's come to an end, and we've been through that process. We've done a review. We've just consulted with our panels, so our Northern, Southern and Western panel, and we'll probably take that feedback on board in terms of sculpturing and crafting the next version of that. But it's important, sometimes things will come to a natural end. They've achieved their objective and we will wind those things up because we want to invest somewhere else. So it's not to say that we're not going to invest somewhere else. We are, of course. So if we tie it up in something that's come to an end, then we can't do something else. But it's also important, I think your point is to listen to a number of people in terms of what that value is. And in the investment that's in my mind at the moment, it's one where I think we we've got some other insights in terms of what that value is, and we'll probably continue it in a space that we probably weren't going to continue it because we've got that feedback. So we are open, and certainly through the regional panels and through that system, interested to hear what that value has been. At the end of the day, we're here to serve industry, and we're here to stand up good investments. And so, if there's something that's industry is really highly valued, then we obviously want to know that. We don't want to stand that down when there's some more value we could extract.
Okay, we've probably got time for one, possibly two more questions. So one.
Craig, Hugh Ritton-Smith here. Just thinking about extending this information, this what's going to come out of the research and development. At the moment, working as an agronomist, we are bombarded with information. How does the GRDC see over the next 5 years you're going to get that information to break through and get through to both farmers and advisors?
Yeah, so as I said before, we're developing a new extension strategy. Embedded in that will be traditional extension, but also I think there's multiple channels to get to that outcome. So part of that is digital. Part of it is a normal communication strategy as well. But I think the digital piece is one that we're going to work on, and it's probably something that internally we're looking at very closely at the moment. So from a digital perspective, we've looked across the business and thought, well, what's our digital strategy? Where would we make investments? And we know that from ideation through to procurement, management, and then leveraging value from those investments, the areas where I think we can extract greater value through an investment in tech and digital is the initial ideation piece, so the potential of ideas coming into the process, and then the extraction of value out the back end. And so digital farm services are certainly front and centre in our minds. Don't forget though, Hugh, that there's multiple ways of doing this work. So participatory action research is about you living with the research. So you don't get a pamphlet at the end or a publication. You're actually part of the research as it's being developed. You're actually framing that research, you're directing that research. So, the adoption piece is about being part of that process and guiding it.
Great, we've got one more question.
Hi, as a farmer, I was talking to another farmer, a peanut grower, up in Kingaroy area a while back, and he's quite disappointed with the GRDC simply because something like sclerotinia in the peanuts, he mentioned biologicals and they won't even look at it. Farmers aren't stupid, they do their own research and they find out things that they think are going to work on areas of disease, and when they approach the GRDC with this suggestion, they just get ignored. So you got that disappointment in farmers because they're not being taken notice of.
Yeah, I guess the way I would respond to that is we do notice and we do take on board that sort of feedback. Not every piece of feedback we received and every idea that we receive results in an investment, right? So, but that's different to not listening, not recognising the feedback, right? So that's really important. And I think don't take it as though if the project's not funded that we haven't thought about it. We haven't thought about how it fits within our portfolio. Perhaps there's other priorities within our portfolio that we want to invest in. It's not to say that it's not important for you, but relative to other things and other impacts that we could make, we have to make a call, and that's probably how we'll make those investments. Even now within our own system, we're making sure that the projects that we've got are balanced, so that we haven't invested too heavily in one area and another area hasn't had that opportunity for growth as well. So it is a really important piece, what you've just mentioned. It's really close to our consideration all the time to make sure we do service as best as we possibly can, but acknowledging that we just can't do everything. Thank you. Yeah.
Great, thanks very much, Craig. And would you like to join with me in thanking Craig for his presentation? So now we'll move on to our next presentation, which is a Zoom presentation. We have Gavin Dwyer and Matthew Clark from Marsden Jacob Associates. Marsden Jacob Associates were recently engaged to undertake an impact assessment on the benefits and costs of 2 grains research projects. The impact assessment for each project was used the 2018 Impact Assessment Guidelines of the Council of Rural Research and Development Corporations. Their assessment has highlighted the significant benefits to the industry, which they will present now.
If you could just unmute yourself, Gavin. Sorry, Gavin, you're just on mute there. Sorry, we still can't hear you.
Just bear with us for a couple of minutes. As you can tell, Zoom has screwed us over again.
I think I'm good now.
You now.
Are we good to go?
Yes, we are.
Okay. Well, first up, what a way to start, eh? So my apologies for that. I'm very pleased to be here. Unfortunately, we couldn't be there with you in a physical presence, so my apologies for that. My name's Gavin Dwyer. I work for Marsden Jacobs Associates. I'm a associate director at the firm, and this work is work that I've done with myself and a colleague, Matthew Clark. Before we get underway, we appreciate the excellent relationships that we've built with the University of Southern Queensland and also the Department of Agriculture and Fisheries in Queensland, and particularly want to put a shout out to Kirsten Vonhoff, who's done an extraordinary amount of work to help us get through this exercise with you to undertake the assessments. So we were commissioned to undertake 2 assessments of projects undertaken by BACI in collaboration with the Department of Agriculture and Fisheries. Those 2 projects, when we look at them, come up with net benefits in the order of $63.5 million and an overall benefit cost ratio of 11.9 to 1. And that's from a combined investment of about $5.8 million. That's a very good and healthy benefit cost ratio. The 2 projects that we evaluated were Project 17, which was USQ 19, genetic control of nematode species affecting major crops, and Project 27, DOR 1810, which was disease epidemiology and management tools for Australian grain growers. The approach that we took for the evaluation is consistent with the Council of Rural Research and Development Corporation's impact assessment guidelines. Those guidelines require us to look at benefits and costs over a 30-year time frame. Our approach to impact assessment is described really in 4 key steps. The most important step is right at the start. We're really trying to define what the project logic is. So what were the project tasks? What were the intermediate outputs from the researchers' work? What were the intermediate outcomes? So what then started to translate into changes? And then what were the final outcomes on farms? By undertaking that project logically, we spend quite a bit of time with researchers and with investors working out that. We then identify the project benefits and define a counterfactual. So when we estimate benefits, we try and think of what are the incremental benefits relative to what might have occurred in the absence of the investment. In the absence of the investment, it doesn't mean nothing happens, other things would have happened, but what's a feasible alternative world that we actually compare against? And as I said, we look at the timing of those benefits and we develop a cash flow of benefits over a 30-year horizon. Some benefits occur over a shorter horizon, but others are long-lived, such as some of the breeding technologies, for example, continue on, and we see quite long time frames for the realisation of benefits. We also gather from the administration of the project detailed costs of the project and what was involved to deliver those outcomes. We then estimate the gross benefits and the gross costs, and then from that we estimate the net benefits. What we'll do is we'll just talk through some of those components. So the first one, Project 27, which was the disease epidemiology and management tools for grain growers. That focused on grain growers trying to assist growers to build better decisions in the management of diseases in cropping to improve their profitability. This work was done in close collaboration with the Western Australia Department of Primary Industries and Regional Development, DPIRD. And the focus of the work really focused on disease management in 3 key areas. First was yellow spot in wheat. second was powdery mildew in mung beans, and the third was black spot in field peas. So as I said, what we do is go through and develop up a program logic. This is a high-level program logic that sets out the broad components of the project. And then we go into a deeper dive. So this is just, for example, one component of that, where we try and understand in more detail what exactly has changed, what's the translation of the delivery of project tasks into outputs and then outcomes, and then to those final outcomes. And our approach is to try and find robust evidence of those intermediate outcome changes and then the long-term outcomes. When we look at this project, which developed up an app for tools to aid growers, we looked at what the uptake and use of that was across the wheat, across mung beans and across field peas. We estimated the net benefits in the order of about 2.2 million. The project costs were 1.3, so the net benefit was around 0.9 million, which led to a benefit cost ratio of about 1.7. The modified internal rate of return is a sort of an economic tool that we use a bit differently. It's a modification of what we call the internal rate of return, but it gives us a good steer on how we get that return on investment. So 7% is looking pretty reasonable. So we came up with, an assessment there that said there was a good outcome. The second project was Project 17, which was genetic control of nematode species affecting major crops. This looked at root lesion nematodes, and they're found throughout Australia's wheat belt, of course, and we know they can severely impact on wheat crop yields. For example, in some areas that can be up to 65% in some years. But obviously that varies, and the scope of their presence is clear from research that 73% of fields surveyed in the northern growing region contained that issue. Now, the most effective method for reducing these costs is to use crop genotypes that have genetic resistance and tolerance. So we really looked at this as a breeding program and understanding those parent lines to have resistance and tolerance to P. thorni and P. neglectus, which were the two key methods. So again, we developed a detailed project or high-level project logic, which stepped out the activities, the outputs of the project, the intermediate outcomes, and then the long-term outcomes. Again, we did a deep dive as well. I won't go into those, but today we'll just focus more on here the net benefits. And we focused on two key benefit areas. One was the avoided losses due to the improved effectiveness of current biosecurity controls. And the second was the value of ongoing biosecurity control to maintain biosecurity control. When we estimated those benefits, and these benefits, because it's a breeding program that continues on and we see those benefits accrue over many years, the incremental benefits, and because it's spread over a large area and we've got substantial crops, those benefits are substantially larger compared to the other projects. So we ended up with incremental benefits of around 67 million. The incremental costs of the project were 4.5 million. So we ended up with net incremental benefits of about 62.5 million. So a benefit cost ratio, a very healthy benefit cost ratio of 14.9 and a modified internal rate of return of 13%. In terms of key learnings, the program logics highlighted areas for future research and follow-on projects. Some of these weren't valued in the benefits. For example, we've set out some ideas there for Project 17 and similarly for Project 27. There's quantitative prioritisation process could lead to future research. And there's new decision research tools that could be used, e.g. for net blotches in barley. And the Yellow Spot app, there's post-project work with Black Paddock and AgWorld to expand the usage of that product. In terms of the root lesion nematodes, there's future QTL and marker research that's required for barley and mung bean and chickpeas for the order of those outputs to be used by commercial breeding programs. And in terms of field peas, there's further work required to develop suitable further research in that field. So that's where we wanted to get to today. We wanted to highlight the the good work that has been done. There is positive and healthy benefit cost ratios that we've developed for these projects, and I'm happy to take questions at this point.
Thanks very much, Gavin. Can you hear us okay there?
Yep, all good.
Do we have any questions for Gavin? So, Gavin, when you're developing these types of benefit cost ratios, etc., and return on investment, one of the really important things seems to be to make sure that you have a plan for doing that even when you start the project. Would you like to comment on that?
Wonderful, Dorothy Dixer. And thanks for the question. Yes, this is something we keep banging on about when we work with agencies, and we work with a lot across a range of agricultural areas, dairy, grains research, sugar, you name it. And where we run into challenges usually is that first up, we see really good scientific project definitions and specifications, but we often don't see a really clean, neat, simple program logic that says this is what I'm going to do and here's the outcomes that it's going to deliver and here's what sort of effects we think we might get for farmers into the future. So ex ante, we don't see a lot of that. And usually we have to come in and retrospectively describe that. In the absence of that description, there's usually an absence of data to measure and value outcomes. So what we'd really like to see very early on in the research process is an anticipation or an expectation that my project could get picked out for evaluation. I need to be prepared for that. I want to demonstrate my value to investors because I wanted people to reinvest into the future and future work that I do, but also I want to demonstrate how good the outcomes were, that it was a good investment. So we think there's considerable opportunity for more effort to be made across the board, and this is across all agricultural research on the whole, for more effort to be made into trying to develop a good ex ante assessment of what will be done, good detailed program logics of what they are planning to do, and that they're monitored over time so that we can start to identify what measures we want to measure to demonstrate those. Those usually need to be thought through in the context of ultimately the final outcomes that are going to get delivered. At a farm level, what's going to change? And being able to find key indicators that are useful to measure that, or have ways and lines of sight to how you might go and gather that into the future. So we think it's a very important area that's often overlooked, and we understand that it can be time consuming and can take a bit of effort, but we think it can be money well spent because it makes it far more efficient to demonstrate your value later on.
Great, thank you very much. Do we have any other questions from the group? Dorothy Dixers or otherwise? We have one.
Yeah, Gavin, just in regards to your comments there, what about a project that has a very good program logic up front, but then the goalposts effectively get changed partway through?
Yeah.
Some thoughts around that? Thank you.
Yeah, this is again a really good one and not unusual for what we see. And there can be really good reasons for a project changing direction through over time. And that's okay if that's agreed that that's what should happen by the investor as well. What we tend to find most challenging is when we find and we come in retrospectively and evaluate and we find the world had moved on during the project. We ended up with multiple project leads. Those leads sort of shifted, the goalpost moved a bit over time. And by the end of it, we're evaluating a project that's quite different to what the original concept was, and no one kind of knows the story of how we ended up there. That's not unusual. So usually what we'd probably like to see is when there's a fundamental reset in a project, that's called out and we acknowledge it and we go, we need to reset what we're trying to do here. We're fundamentally trying to reset what our outcomes are, and we need to re-specify and define them and be clear about that, because there can be some significant confusion that ends up later on about what were we actually trying to achieve. It doesn't mean the science isn't good. It just means we're not clear about what we tried to achieve at the end of the day, and the goalposts moved. Moving goalposts is okay, but being clear about why we've moved them and having everyone clear that we have moved them is really very important.
Great, thank you. Any further questions?
I was just thinking about the response to the goalpost changing. And I mean, if you've done a BCR ex ante, that's your forecast. And if the goalpost changes and you're still doing a BCR at the end of it, you still get to value, you know, what actually happened, and still value that change was actually a worthwhile change versus just a change by default.
Absolutely, that's a perfectly good assessment. What we find challenging from time to time is when that's not understood, and it's not clear what the real outcomes were. Some research gets lost in a bit of research fog from time to time, and when we do evaluations, and we're working across a wide number of industries over large numbers of projects, that occurs from time to time, and we understand that can happen, but it's just trying to avoid those circumstances. What it usually requires is a reset of the counterfactual. So what was going to be the alternative world that we were going to look at, and what's changed with that. Sometimes there's very good reasons why the science changes, and it's because the world that it's operating in changes, and we need to do something a bit different. That's fine. So we just need to reset the clock and make sure that we're all on the same page. I think when sometimes it can be useful too that if you need to reset the clock on research, it's useful to redo an ex ante evaluation and go, here's why we're changing, and we're doing it for these reasons, because ultimately it's about trying to shift the dial further on the outcome that we're trying to achieve. We might be turning up donuts with potential future outcomes heading down a certain route, and we see an avenue of inquiry that's different, and we're going to achieve better outcomes because of it. Fantastic. That makes perfect sense. But be clear about that, restate it, and be clear about what that new goalpost looks like.
Great, thanks very much, Gavin. I think we might have to wrap it up there. Thanks very much for your patience while we got the technology going. Would you like to join with me in thanking Gavin for his presentation?
Thank you.
We now have a short break, about 10 minutes. You have till 3:05 to vote on the posters. If you need to get up and run around, that's fine. There is still coffee and tea outside, and we're now going to set up for our panel discussions, which will start at 3:05. Should have made a run down further.
I've run out of things to say.
Nice to meet you. I didn't realise the other day too. Chris is good.
Yes,
Nice to meet you. He told me and I didn't expect No, no. It's the same as mine.
Yeah, good.
How's things?
Yeah, great, thank you. Yeah, thanks so much for coming. We really appreciate your time. Yes, you met Paul? Yes, moderator for today. Excellent. Any questions?
Oh, did I have to use those? Is it your questions? Boring.
It might be a bit interesting, man.
Oh, did you want to talk about agriculture?
No.
Oh, okay, right. Oh, well, who knows?
Okay, so we've got the...
We'll come up with some questions, I'm sure.
Yes, got everything
Much
set
more
up.
fun when they go in. And look, the thing is, I don't know Andrew, but I know him well enough to he won't accept the premise of the question. So he'll start his answer with that. I don't accept the premise of your question. However, I'll talk about what I've provided. That's what they do. I've seen it before. I am. Okay.
You know, there's evidence. Shit. I wasn't booking on evidence. It was all going to be hearsay. You can't prove a thing. Sorry?
I'll stand from the table here because I'd like to actually. So I'd like to.
That's not me, that's not you.
scooch to the side.
It's all about me.
Hi, everybody. Ready? It's not bad when everyone's
Easy as that.
That's hiding that.
If we could have everyone start to move back to their seats, please.
Why? Sorry, why? Yeah, so talking about the fact that you've done hundreds of workshops and things and what works with whom and why. How do we actually get those types of situations to work to get information across, and how do you measure success? Right. And then I've got one that's a bit more open there, which is commercial companies and industry players can find the R&D sector complex, opaque and somewhat scary. What can we do to change the perception and actually create more integration and collaboration? Because it is
Sure.
yeah.
Highball, mate.
All right.
Okay, grab your seats.
What are we talking about? 2 hours? My bug's the end. Oh.
Come on. Boy, good. Yeah, exactly.
Okay, welcome back everyone to the final session for this afternoon. This afternoon's final session is about impact through industry collaboration. So how do we get collaboration across the industry from various sectors? We held a session like this in the last BACI showcase and it was very successful. We got a lot of industry and a lot of audience buy-in and what was being said there, and it gives us an opportunity to deep dive into a number of these issues. The format of the session will be the moderator, Paul Maybush, has a series of questions that he'll be proposing to the panel. They will then talk about those, and then there will be an opportunity for questions to come at the end of this. So start to think about what your questions are likely to be. There is one handheld microphone that's doing a rotation around the room. We've given the rest away over here. So just wait for that when you come in for questions. So let me introduce the panel. First off, as the moderator, we have Paul Maybush. Paul is the Managing Director of Colair Group and has a long track record in research, development, extension and also commercialisation. We have Andrew Short. Andrew is the Managing Director for Advanta Seeds here in Toowoomba and for Australia. We have Gillian Mempam. Gillian is the Senior Regional Manager for Grains Research and Development Corporation. She's also here in Toowoomba. We have Paul McIntosh, who everybody knows, I think, so, you know. Industry Development Agronomist, Northern Region for Pulse Australia and WeedSmart. And Bronwyn Venus. Bronwyn is the Head of Strategy and Insights and Engagement at SRA. So I'll pass now to Paul to start to run the session.
Thanks very much, Gavin, and welcome to all of you. I actually had a much more interesting introduction for everybody, but that's okay. I wanted to talk about the fact that Paul wears a lot of hats and talks through most of them. And as the hair continues to thin, he needs more hats. I wanted to talk about Bronwyn's affinity for the colour purple, how she managed to turn UQ to purple, and now moving to SRA, suspect that they may actually be going purple too. But anyway, look, let's move on. Thank you for coming and thank you for being with us today. And I do expect some questions from the field, please. But first of all, I'm going to start with a question for each of them that I feel they are most engaged on that particular subject and can get the conversation going, but then they will talk amongst themselves. Your job is to jump in and question them somewhat as well. So first of all, I'd like to go to Andrew first. Andrew's organisation sits part way within a value chain. At one end, you've got genetics R&D being fed in through state-owned breeding programs, GRDC-funded breeding programs, and breeding programs around the world. And at the other end is the grower. Andrew, how do you translate what's needed by the grower through back that pipeline? How do you communicate with that pipeline when you're talking, in some cases, 10 years out, and understand what you're going to need?
Thanks, Paul, and good afternoon, everyone. Look, it's a good question. As Paul rightly said, it can take us the best part of 10 years to bring a new hybrid to market. So for those that don't know, Advanta Seeds in Australia trades as Pacific Seeds. So we've been based in Toowoomba for an awfully long time, in business for a little over 60 years. But because it takes such a long time to bring a new product to market, having some of those insights as to what a product is going to need to have as attributes in the future is crucial. So for example, the breeding programs today that are starting to make crosses need to have a product which is hopefully suitable for a market in 2033. So how do we go about identifying those attributes? There's a few different ways. Regular contact through our own teams with agronomists and also farmers themselves about the challenges that they're facing in their operations. Attending forums such as this as well about new innovation, working with parties such as the GRDC, tertiary institutions as well, such as this one. But it's all about communication and regular communication. What are the things that are likely to pose problems and opportunities for growers going forward? So, for example, in recent years we've launched dual stack herbicide tolerant canola. So these are canolas, both GM and non-GM products, which stack multiple modes of action of herbicide tolerance. And that is in response to growing issues around herbicide resistance that growers had identified for many years. So that sort of collaboration and opportunities led to the release of products such as that. I think the things that are coming for the future are things around sustainability and carbon capture, etc. Sustainable grains, particularly for our export partners, we're looking at opportunities in that. So it's a long lens that we need to use. We're literally looking, hopefully, for products that are going to be suitable in 10 years. Because if the grower isn't profitable, if it's a product that doesn't work for them, ultimately, we're not profitable as a result either.
Thank you, Andrew. I'll throw back over to Gillian now to answer on behalf of GRDC, who's obviously investing earlier in that chain. How are you hearing messages flowing back through there, and how do you work on an equally long timeline?
Thanks, Paul, and good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for staying. We know sometimes in these very long days, and it's been a super day, it can get a bit tiresome. Wayne is very popped up there on his tea. I hope everyone else has got a bit of caffeine. I need to ask you a question as well, but first of all, I'll answer in terms of how GRDC engages to understand that, to hope that we're on the right track in terms of our R&D projects. So being really close to our customers, growers, we share that. Understanding their needs, their opportunities, constraints, providing many opportunities for them to engage with GRDC, not just with GRDC directly, but with you, our research partners as well. So creating those forums where growers can reach into the organisation and express what they're hearing, what they need. That long lens is the challenging piece. And I guess that's where I'm going to come at you with a question. So you've got a Titanic in terms of product development. You get set at the beginning and off you sail. How do you switch? How do you pivot? How do you change? We were just hearing in the last presentation about that need to pivot in the middle of R&D programs sometimes.
It's really difficult. It's a slow ship to turn, and once you've made the investment and you're many years into that, unfortunately, it's not a quick fix. If things change, circumstances change, you have to have an attitude, and this is something that Pacific Seeds has had for a long time, to experiment, be bold, and also be prepared to fail. We've had plenty of failures where we've gone down the path. We've been in and out of crops over the 62 years that the business has been around, and we've made strategic decisions to enter and also strategic decisions to exit. They're never easy decisions. They're very costly, and it needs to take many years to change course and then get back on track. But it's equally important to make those decisions when something's not working or doesn't have the potential you once hoped, that you are strong enough in making the decision of cutting things and moving forward. Because when we talk about, I think what we're going to be talking about today about the research dollar, it makes little sense to continue pouring money into something which has got very little, for us at least, commercial potential. So it's important to stop. Yes, you take a hit, and yes, it takes time, but redivert those funds into something that is going to be, commercially viable going forward. It's always a tough decision.
I guess GRDC made the decision probably about 2 years ago now to bring in a program called the National Grower Network, and part of that is underpinned by short-term local demonstration extension primarily. Craig touched on it earlier when he was speaking. It's delivering our research outcomes. So it's delivering known research outcomes in that D&E style, but it's also an opportunity to pilot, to innovate, and sometimes that can be in a really hands-on, close-to-grower way, potentially even on-farm. But it's a real challenge for both of us in terms of being able to innovate on the go. So not just innovation at the beginning of the program when you're setting up that 5-year, potentially 10-year R&D program, but as you're moving along.
We're going to throw now to Bron. You've joined SRA in the last year after a number of years with a research institution, with QAFI. So you've been on both sides of the equation, so to speak there. What are the barriers you see to those effective collaborations between those two types of organisations? Funding from one side from an industry, research being driven with research outputs on the other side.
Thanks for that. People are the barrier, there's no doubt about it. No, in all seriousness, the interesting thing coming from a university, and I have to put this out there, no disrespect to the academics in the room, but academics like to solve problems. That's what they're good at doing. What they're not good at doing is asking the end user, what is the problem? So let me clarify that. As a young researcher, I was working with Carol Fertility, and we did a project that reduced the number of bulls on a property. And I said to a farmer, we've reduced the number of bulls you need. And he said, that's great, but my calves are still dying. So while we fixed a problem, it wasn't the problem that was the most important for him. So now that I'm on the other side of the fence, and I've essentially got the money, I like to think I have the money, I don't. Now I can look at proposals that come to us and say, well, what's the benefit and how does it fit our program? Now, the other problem I have, of course, is Sugar research is a very narrow field if you look at it with blinkers. But the one thing that connects every RDC is soil, the ground. You can't do anything without the ground. So I'm very much someone who wants to collaborate and break down these barriers and work together so that we can solve these problems. So you asked me about the barrier crossing over from the university over to an RDC. We're unique in that we have our own researchers, and they are sugarcane experts. What I'm trying to teach them is that they're actually experts. Sugarcane happens to be the thing they're focused on now, but they could quite easily work with GRDC, cotton, MLA to improve soil health, to improve fibre, to improve a lot of things. So just because we're in the sugarcane industry doesn't mean we should only focus on sugarcane.
So how do we focus some of those fantastic innovations that might have come through those channels of a particular industry and move them across the industries more easily? And I'll throw to Gillian first on that one as well.
Communication and relationships. People are the problem and they're the solution. So, till I'm blue in the face, communication and relationships. Collaboration and collaboration properly. And Bron, collaborating on the problem, not the solution. Resist the urge to rush to the research proposal. Spend twice as much time scoping the problem with your customers, with growers. Take that time. It is always time well spent, and I will push back on anyone that calls it a talk fest. I would much rather spend my time scoping that problem, truly drilling down and understanding customer need, than hair off in a direction and then 1 or 2 years down the track have that conversation with the grower. That's not what I meant. Think, I've wasted years and funds. Scope the problem.
And I was going to start with, my answer was, Craig started off with communication. Andrew's talked about communication. Gillian's talked about communication. And I'm sure my weed man will eventually talk about communication. So there's no one solution to fit all, but if you at least communicate, you're starting.
Thank you, Bron. You mentioned weeds there, and that is a good segue here because I want to go to Macca now. You've got a Weed Smart shirt on, and Weed Smart is about going across different crops, different areas, and you are also a systems person. Tell me about how you connect those dots and bring lots of people to the table for the conversation on an issue like weeds.
Believe it or not, it starts with food. It starts with morning teas and lunches and afternoon teas. And I'm a regular visitor to GRDC, and they've got some particular biscuits there that no one else eats.
He has blown my budget. I can't afford to feed him anymore.
But isn't it great that I can go to GRDC and sit around the table there and they all come in for the thing and we have a bit of a chat about stuff. It's amazing what you communicate and talk about in those things, apart between whose biscuits, whose sort of stuff, despite the budget. But that's a good start, Paul, for that communication and finding out what's going on. And it's a two-way street, isn't it? Like I got lots of people and I talk to lots of people and I write lots of words and I'm in front of the media quite a bit, and you get a lot of feedback from those things, from the newspaper, from the TV, from the radio. You get a lot of feedback from all those things about our agricultural industry in Queensland particularly. And then you go along and you talk to the GRDC people, and I talk to Bronwyn's SRA people about herbicide resistance. And by the way, Bronwyn, you've got plenty but you just don't know it. And I talked to Andrew quite a bit over the years because my association with Pacific Seeds goes way back to the late 1970s when I started to walk around paddocks. So a lot of communication, absolutely, but it's where you do it, and I do it absolutely everywhere, particularly where there's food. Paul, did you get that part? And of course, the Pulse Australia part, I've been an old Pulse man for a long time, and then of course the Weed Smart logo just goes so well with what I do with both particular roles that I'm in. So communication, it's people, I love people. It's the media and getting the feedback from that media, and then it's turning up in great days like this where I catch up with my old mate like Huey Two Fathers there in the green shirt, Glenn Milne, David Hamilton, all these people that I've known for many, many years, and talk about stuff that's going on in their world.
Macca, while I've got you, you have literally done hundreds, if not thousands, of workshops, field walks, grower talks, grower shed talks. What works? what doesn't work, why does it work, and how do we actually measure success from those types of events?
Measuring the success is a really challenge. Usually you hope that people come up and talk to you and say, hey, that was a great talk, I learned something. And I talk about the 3 I's, and Peter Newman from Western Australia and Geraldton over there, Pete's part of the Weed Smart crew, and he has this 3 I's, and if I get them right, I'll be right. It's inform, influence, and inspire. So we're informing, we're telling them about the issue of the problem. Influence, you're wanting some practice change, and then inspire, when they take your message that you've been informing and influencing them with, they take it out into the other parts of the world and pass it on. And that's the 3 I's that I try and work off with a whole heap of things, with whether it be pulse crops and or our Weed Smart banner.
And on that, I'll go both to Bron and to Gillian there. With RDCs, there's a real danger of saturation point when it comes to things like workshops and field days. How do you cut through those? Everyone wants to try and get on the bandwidth, but the bandwidth is narrowing.
You've just articulated one of our strongest current challenges. So we were talking about it earlier. It is such a cluttered space, an increasingly cluttered space. Growers, industry, and one fellow said to me the other day, I'm being shouted at every day. I'm being shouted at on my laptop, my phone, the radio. There is just so much information. How do you achieve cut-through and what works? And the answer is not one thing. I think cross-commodity demonstration and extension is absolutely key. Growers don't think about single commodity. They think about their enterprise. How are they going to make their enterprise more profitable, more sustainable, safer? They're not thinking about grain, cotton, cattle or sugar. They're thinking about their business, so delivering in that cross-commodity way. It has to provide a strong return on investment. Everyone is time poor. We've watched what were 4 family farms now become one big corporate farm, corporate family farm. Oh, I think I've just lost my mic. I think that notion of providing good return on investment for their time has to be front and centre all the time. But at GRDC, we're having a big conversation, corporate initiative at the moment, about which channel we prioritise and optimise. But it's not one single thing. It is an absolute, and we've seen this in our communication channels, where we used to engage with local radio and TV. Tony Soames, our head of comms, we now have got podcasts, video, YouTube, webinar. We're on all social media. That takes a lot of time. But leaving our research outcomes in academic papers and in the library is not an option. So we have to do what it takes, but massive challenge.
I've yet to see Macca on TikTok, but...
Never.
All right. You heard that, never. There's a challenge. I'm going to throw to Andrew now, and I think it's often said that commercial companies and other industry players can find the R&D sector, and that includes all of us, and a lot of us in the room here, as being somewhat complex, opaque, and even a bit scary. How do we break through that? How do we change that perception? And how do we actually create that integration and those relationships, and beyond just the big multinationals that they have R&D? How do we play with lots of others in our ecosystem?
It's a good question, and look, it's challenging. I don't know that I'd describe it as scary, but sometimes I would describe it as frustrating. We get approached regularly, if not every week, certainly multiple times a month, to participate in a project of some sort, whether people are looking for a financial contribution, an in-kind contribution, and they're all great ideas. Often some of these ideas are exactly the same, but from a different party. And that's a frustration. And I suppose, taking a step back, commercial organisations, a lot like every other organisation, has only so much money that they can invest in various parts of their business, including R&D. So, we want to ideally get bang for our buck. That more often than not will mean commercial outcomes. Now, some of that will have a significant lead time. We do put a certain percentage of our R&D budget into blue sky projects that may never see the light of day, and that's to my earlier point about being bold and prepared to experiment. That's a really important part of what we do. But when we are looking to enter into agreements with various parties, one of the frustrations I think is who is the guru, the best person or body to go to for this particular challenge. Or alternatively, there are so many different bodies, organisations, advocacy groups, CRCs, that have overlap with what they're working on. I think Bronwyn touched on it really well. Soils is a great example. There's something that's common across broadacre cropping, sugar, hort, cotton, even livestock, something we've all got in common. And between all those organisations, a lot of people are working on soil projects, many of them very common to each other. Now, the research dollar only has so far to go, and it's very frustrating to see a dilution effect when people are funding very similar projects, which will likely lead to very similar outcomes. I think when I go back to my earlier point about who do we go to, when many things are going on with different parties nationally and internationally, where to put the money and who best to partner with is a challenge. Now, some of that comes back to experience and having worked with people for an extended period of time. Often you fall back to where you're comfortable. But that can sometimes mean you're missing opportunities too with new people that might be entering the space. So I don't know so much scary, but frustration, and part of me thinks, and this is a personal opinion, that some form of consolidation could be something really worthwhile to make sure that that research dollar isn't being spread too thinly.
Thank you, Andrew. And there's no question, there is almost more research than there is dollars to do it. So that prioritisation and that Vegemiting can be a real problem or a challenge at least. I've got lots more questions, but I'd like to throw it open if someone else would like to throw a question to. I know that Gavin will always have one because that's his role, but has anyone else got a question we'd like to throw to our panel? And if you'd like to direct it to one of the people on the panel first, and then someone else will probably pick it up also. Up the back here. John.
Yes. So I'm not sure who I would address this to, but I think it can be. So Macca knows I'm happy, I'm comfortable talking to lots of people. But one of the things I've learned from the university when I was here was that it's not easy for new postdocs and masters to go and approach people like yourselves. They've got talent, they don't know how to do that. And I was wondering if we could do better at trying to create opportunities for us to showcase what these young people are coming through are doing, so that then we can get the opportunity to learn some of the new ideas that are coming through. It's not to say that we would take every one of them, but it's just an idea that I think we could do better in terms of showcasing. There's lots of incredible PhD work done across a number of universities that I've seen, and I'm just wondering if there's a way we can harness it like we've done with some of the young agros with GRDC.
I'd like to respond to that one. Something that I've been participating in a lot since I left the university are EMCR forums, where the early to mid-career researchers have an opportunity to talk about the work they're doing in front of industry reps. It always involves a glass of wine, I have to say, but it does give them an opportunity to get used to that pitch, having to talk about their work in front of people that's not necessarily a scientific-based bent. It's not other academics, it's industry folks, so you do have to change the way you sell yourself. And then after that, the industry people can talk and mingle with them so that they realise we're really not as scary. So this has been working a lot, and I've been participating in a fair bit of this, and I'm a huge advocate of EMCRs because they're going to be tomorrow's researchers, so we've got to help them come through with confidence.
I think that's a great idea, Bronwyn. I think, and once again, there's going to be many platforms and many ways of doing this. GRDC have partnered with Cotton RDC and Crop Consultants Australia to run a program called Emerging Agriculturalists. It's piloted in the northern region. I expect and hope that it will roll out nationally. And it's about partnering those young emerging researchers with industry and with agronomists who are their peers. I look at our current senior researchers and they have super strong engagement to industry, and for whatever reason I am not seeing that come through as much at the moment. So we've put in place a formal investment to try and make that happen across broadacre ag, in our case, grain and cotton. But researchers are always stronger when they're close to industry, and I think that can start right at the beginning. It doesn't have to wait until you're senior. It can, having that peer group, cohort, that's really diverse is important.
And they did this last week down at Colonsay, was it last week? 40,000 million flies and about 25 very ears open type young agriculturalists, as you say, and then a couple of old crusty fellas like myself and Mike Bell, etc., etc. And it was a great sort of a day, and we had a bit of a talk about it, and I did my usual weed identification test, which they're going to pick up on, they just assure me. But those sorts of things are fantastic because we are approachable, us older crusty fellas, aren't we, Huey? And we are approachable by all the young people. And I was inspired, the Three Eyes, by those young people out there with all their projects. And nice to see some of them with 6 of them among beans too, I might add. So well done there. But certainly there's a lot going on there. Happy to have all those kids come and talk to me.
It's a really good point, Macca. It goes both ways. JR, you know the energy you get when you're you engage with emerging either agronomists or researchers. I find I leave much more energised than when I entered those sorts of events. Time well spent.
And I think the only thing I would add to that is businesses, certainly ours, are very happy for researchers, up-and-coming talent to come in and approach us about opportunities. We've actually got someone embedded in the business at the moment from a university. But likewise, we're often looking to upskill our own staff, so staff that are within our business. We've got a gentleman at the moment in one of our breeding programs that is going to start a PhD. So it goes back the other way too, where we're often have people already in our organisation which we're looking to invest in and bring up. So the door's always open and very happy for people to come certainly to our business and explore opportunities.
Got a question up the back here.
Yeah, sure. Just in regards to the whole, thought of the panel session, impact through industry collaboration, one of the challenges I see is, like we talked about soils, and that it hasn't, follow through all the different industries we work in and the spaces. If you put out the word drought at the moment, so many of us are in the drought space, whether it's in a project or, there's leverage or, we're delivering in that space or we're well aware of that thing. How do we make sure that we get the best value as an industry, not just individual, departments or universities or, GRDC or whatever? How do we get the best value in that space? Because a lot of us are all on different projects but working in the same space. So that's the question I pose to the panel.
I think just to start on that, I mean, drought's a great example, of course, incredibly topical, unfortunately. I think if you look at drought, I mean, ultimately we're looking at climate. And like soil, that is something that is not unique to the broadacre cropping industry, it's unique to agriculture. So I think, there's lots of industry bodies working on climate and as a result, drought. So it comes back to, I think, to those earlier points on communication, where what's the overall challenge for the ag industry? Where are the assets and the financial investments available to address some of these challenges? Because I think going back to my earlier point around duplication, is it mine? Is it? Hello. Hello. Going back to my earlier point around duplication, climate is a huge challenge, whether you're a livestock body, a grains body, hort, sugar, cotton, ag generally. It's a hot topic and everyone's working on it. Unfortunately, some of them are probably doing things which are really, really noble and great, but are also being done on the opposite side of the country or indeed in a different building in Brisbane. So communication's got to be crucial.
I think we're seeing a change too. We've got groups like the Future Drought Fund, we've got NRM. They're bringing people together on similar platforms. And I think we're starting to break down some of those silos. It's silos. And we were talking about it earlier. There's no reason why one group can't talk to another group so that we can combine our resources. But I do think you're seeing a change. The Future Drought Fund's a classic example of that.
I just want to talk a little bit about horizon scanning and the skill that is horizon scanning. It's really easy not to do it. It takes time. It's time well spent. Again, we were talking before about cross-RDC investment. commercial collaboration in the ag space. What about the people that are adjacent to us that aren't in the ag space? Defence, mining. Just looking in our own backyard, Australia, that's not cool. We need to look internationally, but we need to look beyond the agricultural backyard too, to R&D that's occurring in other industries that means something to us. And carbon and soil is another really good example there. Water use. Now, mining, they grapple with water use all the time. There's learnings that we can have there. So developing that horizon scanning skill and putting the time into it is time well spent. And some of our organisations have not been in the past great at displaying what they do. It takes a fair bit of effort. Coming along to days like this, obvious, that's a no-brainer, that's really easy. Sometimes you've got to drill pretty hard and knock on quite a few doors to get what you need in terms of understanding exactly what's going on in a project or within an organisation, but certainly worth taking that time. Those R&D dollars are finite and thin. We don't want to double up. That's a fail. If we're doubling up on R&D, we've really missed the boat. Thinking about international research, I'll often hear, oh, it was done in the States, but it means nothing here. Some of it will mean something here. At the very least, understand and what was done. Perhaps we need to test, demonstrate for Australian conditions, but it's not going to. Some of it is going to be of use. So looking up and out a lot harder than we have been, I think, is super important.
So Gillian, on that angle that you bring up there, one of the real challenges for organisations that don't work in our agricultural sector is we often assume that they understand what our issue is. How do we articulate our issues really clearly to that bigger, broader audience, and perhaps even talk about the size of the prize to encourage them?
You just nailed it, the size of the prize. So we're back to scoping now. And I agree. When we're in our own little dung heap, it's really easy to think that everyone understands what we do and know and are. Being able to clearly articulate that to someone from another industry entirely is a bit of a skill in itself. And once again, something that's worth doing. I love to take a user along, a grower. Bring a grower to the conversation. No one can more clearly articulate the opportunity than a grower. I think that's time and energy well expended. I really love the notion, and we've seen this in other industries, Paul, where we bring the product development really close to the end user and then have the manufacturing close by as well. And when we think about pilot projects, thinking about the manufacturing stage, the commercialisation stage, at the beginning, at that pilot project. You won't have all the answers, that's because you're doing a pilot project, but think about it, at least turn your attention to it. When I think about R&D outcomes as a product, having the factory floor close to the development team, close to the end user, you are always going to get the fastest and best result.
Andrew, I want to throw to you on that one. You're part of a multinational. Your company has feet in a lot of paddocks in a lot of different continents. How do you draw on some of what's found and learnt in those places to build on what you can do here and to reach back in our chain?
That's right. So we have sister companies right around the world, US, Argentina, India, Thailand, Africa and Europe, and many places in between. The way we work our R&D program globally, we have R&D centres in most of those locations I just mentioned, but there's some coordination that happens at a global level. So we make the decision that a certain project will be done in Australia, for example, and we do a lot of sorghum research in particular in Australia. But other crops, we might find that Argentina, as an example, might be the best place to do some of that work, not all of it. But I think it was Gillian's point before, it's not true that if it was done on the other side of the world that it doesn't have some form of use in this part of the world. So we have the ability, I suppose, and we're fortunate that we can pick and choose the problem and the potential partner to help us solve it globally. So that's a big thing for us. If I'm honest around the Australian business within the Advanta Group globally, it's a mature business within the Advanta Group across the world. The growth that we're seeing in other parts of the world like India and Thailand and Indonesia, Australia saw many, many years ago, decades ago. So Advanta's Australia's role, the Pacific Seeds role within the global group, is actually a lot of the R&D. So the biggest R&D spend globally within Advanta in terms of research partnerships sits within the group here. And that's because we've got a lot of world-class researchers, many of them in this room, and we've got existing partnerships that we know will help deliver benefits for the other partners around the world which originate in Australia. So that's a key role of Pacific Seeds today within Advanta. The genetics, Aussie genetics work well in other parts of the world, but also the R&D working out from here, but also bringing in some of those benefits that we might see in other parts of the world.
Bron, did you want to have a go at that one too? No? It wasn't on the list, I'm sorry. Macca, you look after a number of different crops with your pulse hat and a number of different areas with your weeds hat. How do you possibly stay across the huge amount of research that people in this room, for example, are putting out on a daily basis? How do you know about it? How do you pick and choose? How do you connect with it to then pass some of it on?
It's called 11:30 at night type reading type stuff, mate. But it is a challenge. But, you know, Gillian mentioned before, there's podcasts, there's webinars, etc. Some of them I'm on, some of them I just have to listen to, mate. But it's a whole raft of issues. It's not just one thing. I don't just listen to Twitter, you know, or X is what it's called these days. How imaginative is that, for goodness sake? It's a whole heap of things. So I might be talking to good friends like Glenn Milne and David Hamilton, you know, about X, Y, Z, and that gives me and stuff. Then I'm talking to Michael Witterick up there. Hello, Michael. That's what I mentioned. Then I'm sending an email to Nikki Seymour to talk about inoculant. I guess I've been in the industry long enough that I know a lot of people, and I can go and talk to them quite easily. But, you know, I suppose the positives are all there with those, the Weed Smart and the Pulse Australia. The one negative I've found is the way the chickpea programs happen in Queensland. You know, we've been just completely cut off, and it's very sad to see the chickpea push as for a rotation crop in our countryside hasn't quite made it into Queensland as good as it was. We had 1.3 million hectares of desi chickpeas in the northern region, 2016, 2 million tonnes. And a good old Anna, she said the whole countryside's running on coal, mung beans and chickpeas in Queensland. But unfortunately, that is one thing where it's been a failure. They haven't connected the dots. I've tried to connect the dots with the researchers, with the farmers, with the agronomists and other industry people of my particular persuasions of Wheat Smart and the pulse thing, particularly the mung beans. Did that answer the question?
It's not bad.
I thought so.
As a group, none of you are sitting in the research hat, so to speak, within a university. So what advice would you give to universities in terms of collaborating with industry, collaborating with companies? What advice do you give the researchers in this room on how to reach out and do that?
I'm always up for a beer. So if they buy me a beer, we can have a chat about anything I like. But in all seriousness, it comes right back to communication. Talk to your mentors, talk to your supervisors, find out who to talk to in GRDC or Sugar or MLA, and go and have a talk to them and find out where their pain points are. Read their strategic plans, because that will identify where the pain points are, and then go and have a conversation. It all comes back to the water cooler conversations. You learn more at a water cooler conversation than you do at a conference.
So I'm champagne, just so you know, just putting that out there. I will also drink beer, but champagne is good.
Prosecco at a push?
Prosecco at a push, okay. Craig displayed very clearly GRDC's next 5-year RD&E plan earlier. We have gone down the path of value pools, so we have put investment parameters and amounts to where we're turning our Titanic. And it is a bit of a, you know, that's what it takes to turn any program really, an RDC program or a commercial program in R&D. It takes a bit of movement. It's an open book. Anyone can see. We've said very clearly where we are keen to invest in the next 5 years, and 5-year plans don't stop and start. They continue on. Doors open. Everyone knows my phone number. It's on the website. Come and chat. It is the conversation. But so you can look at our 5-year R&D plan. You can see what our priorities are. What are yours? any conversation is two-way. So finding the sweet spot in a strategic partnership or whatever you want to call it is that you and I have the same priority. It's something that your organisation wants to invest in. It's something that my organisation wants to invest in. That's a conversation straight up.
Go on. Go on, Paul.
I was going to give you a couple of examples of collaboration. We know that CRDC and GRDC are doing a lot of work in the spray drift thing, and I've got to do a couple of talks down in northern New South Wales. That's a really, really good thing. But here's one involving USQ, and I've been aware of USQ for quite some time. I've talked to Craig before, and I've talked to a lot of other people out here before. So at Wheat Smart Week in February this year, we had the USQ, the Brains Trust. Derek was there with a few different things. So we invited them out to our Wheat Smart Field Day at a farmer's place. And it went over really well. We had plenty of smoke in our eyes and dust in our ears and all that sort of stuff. But Derek Long and the crew from USQ did a great day out there at Wheat Smart. It was different than just Paul McIntosh talking about herbicide resistance and make sure you kill all the beggars and don't leave any survivors, etc. So here comes Derek Long with a different take on about our farming systems. And that was a really good day. So the collaboration was from me talking to Craig originally, and then Craig said, we'll go and talk to Derek, and away we went. So it was just a matter of communication. We got beer, we got wine, and we got orange slice and Scotch finger biscuits, all right? So that's the go. Communication, absolutely, but it doesn't have to be just on a telephone or by email. It can be face-to-face. See what the other person look like. Come to their venue, invite them to your venue, but get some communication going somehow or other.
Can I just add, sorry, Shorty, it's open communication too, isn't it, Macca? It's cards on the table. Open, honest, transparent communication. Not trying to be clever and hold stuff back and think, oh, I don't know if I'll tell them that. Open, collaborative, and trust as well. So forming those really trusting relationships. And that conversation might result in nothing. It's still not wasted time. It's forming a relationship, the basis of a relationship, where another conversation might spit out 6 months, a year down the track.
And I think that's right. The only thing I would add to that, perhaps a suggestion, I think industry round tables that could be facilitated, for example, by the likes of UniSQ, where you pull 15, 18, 20 different organisations together, grower groups, RDCs, CRCs, commercial organisations, researchers, just put it on the table. What are you grappling with? What are your challenges? Identify what are the things that we've got in common. Who is best placed to contribute to overcoming some of these challenges? Well, we've got money, this person's got researchers, we've got this, we've got that. I think transparency, as Gillian rightly said, honesty, and try and break down some of those silos which were touched on, identify the common issues that we've all got to overcome and try and work together as best as possible to overcome those challenges. Businesses such as ours are even looking for evolving topics such as AI, as an example. We've got a lot of opportunities, some of them scary challenges as well with things like that, but organisations like ours are looking for training of staff on things like that. Institutions such as this can potentially be providing some training to our staff, short courses and the like. That could also work for some of those other industry bodies. So, working together, being open and transparent, I think is crucial and can help us optimise outcomes.
The joy of those sorts of forums also is the ability to form consortia. So if the problem is scoped up, if you've spent enough time scoping up the problem and understanding it, within your organisation, you might have enough to solve 70%. Who's the best dude to do the other 30%? And not being scared of reaching outside any one particular organisation, but finding the right capacity, capability within potentially another organisation. So those roundtables are excellent for putting those sort of things together, I think.
Can I just quickly add, for the EMCRs, how many EMCRs do we have in the room? Sorry, how many have applied for grants? How many have been rejected? Have you contacted the funding body to say, I didn't get that. Can we have a chat about what I was lacking, what I was missing? How can I do better next time? You've done two things. You've learnt through the process and you've made a connection to the funding body and they know that you're interested in improving. So reach out.
The last question from me, but there may be some more from the field, is I feel rather remiss that we haven't talked about the one area that all of us rely on, and that is our consumers, our markets, and the pull-through that's required to ensure that our industries are successful. Can you each make a quick comment on the important part that you feel your organisation plays in connecting to those markets, those consumers, to build us a bigger, better demand for our product and a bigger, better industry?
Can I go first?
No. Yes, all right.
I constantly talk about MRLs. Everyone know what MRLs are? For those uninformed, maximum residue levels or maximum residue limits. They're all talking about the pesticide residue in our grain crops and, of course, hay and all the other fodder crops that we have too. But particularly of mine is the grain crops. And we've been having pretty well over the past years about having too much pesticide, be whatever one it is, in our grain, being export, and sometimes it's coming back to local stuff too. So that quality of grain with those MRLs and those withholding periods and those unregistered chemicals, they're just not on anymore. I know Paul McIntosh used to walk around, and if the fence post stood up and the barbed wire didn't go rusty and the cattle didn't die and you sprayed on the crop and you killed whatever's there, it was fair game. Don't worry about that label. That's immaterial. But these days, I'm a reformed character, as I tell everybody. Reformed, I say. Stop laughing, David Hamilton. Reformed. So I'm sticking to it. So those MRLs are so critical. That quality of our grain, our clean green mung beans, where we talk about incessantly, and our sorghum crops too. Like, don't be surprised if some drums overseas are going to bounce up and down a bit more about glyphosate residue in our grain sorghum crops. That might be coming down the railroad tracks. So that MRL, that quality of grain, is what I preach about all the time. And it's something we should all take note of, researchers or not, and that quality of grain for that export potential and the domestic consumption is so very important for our future, for using our different pesticide angles in our grain crops in Australia.
Okay, we export most of our sugar as raw sugar, so it's not being exported as a food. However, how you can help me support our industry: drink more Coke, eat more chocolate, but all in moderation, and sugar is really not evil.
I'd probably just echo what Macca said. I think from our perspective, we obviously sell seed to Australian producers. It's important that those producers have got markets to go to. If they don't want to grow canola because there's no market, or sorghum because there's no market, that doesn't work for growers, and it doesn't work for us because it all flows up and down the chain, as we all know. So, we do play an active engagement and have an active role in working with the likes of Australian Oilseeds Federation for oilseed crops like canola. Ensure 60 to 70% of our canola ends up in the EU. They have some really high sustainable targets that they need people to meet, and it's important that we play a role in ensuring that we're sharing information which might need to be shared around the seed side of things, so that those markets remain open. If they close, the impact on the commodity price obviously is significant, and that flows back to seed companies such as ours. So it's continuous working and, I guess, identifying and knowing about those markets and how our products suit those markets, and that comes with identifying opportunities too. We might have existing things, but there's also some specialty things, end uses that are of interest sometimes. So ensuring that there's value right up and down the chain is crucial.
You will have seen on GRDC's RD&E plan, which I'm sure you've all read cover to cover, the fourth pillar, grow markets and capture value. So GRDC are turning our attention very strongly to our end user in that sense. We've done the value proposition in terms of RD&E expenditure there, and it's an investment well worth making on behalf of Australian grain growers. Here in the northern region, all leviable grains are grown. That's my challenge. It's the challenge of the northern team to represent that across the RD&E portfolio. We talked earlier about prioritisation. We can't undertake all RD&E, and often allocating expenditure across the crops is a challenge, but it's a particular challenge for us because we grow everything up here, and we want to ensure that we have captured value for grain growers and grown those markets across all crops, including the beloved pigeon pea.
Do we have a last final question? Perhaps something that's going to stump them. They seem to have managed all these other questions a little too easily. Do we have anything else that's going to challenge them here? One in the middle here.
You said you weren't going to say anything, Michael Witterick.
You assumed it was for you, didn't you, Macca? Yeah.
I guess this is a question more towards the RDCs. We talk about consolidation across industries, including joint projects and the like. Is there a formal process that you currently have in place to do that, or is it more of an ad hoc type approach to get all the RDCs together to try and work towards these consolidated projects?
Now, we know it's not easy. No one said it was easy to create cross-RDC, cross-commodity projects, but I think it's absolutely worth doing. There isn't a formal process, it's a conversation. And it starts with scoping the problem, I think, Michael, like anything, and then the value proposition. What's the size of the prize for undertaking it? And being, once again, really open with those conversations. It mightn't always be an even split, and we might have slightly different approaches and reasons for undertaking, but having that big conversation at the beginning will pull all that out. But yeah, no formal process, but super keen to undertake those. I see real worth in that space.
I think I've gone 26 seconds over. So I'd like you to all please thank our guests up here, their willingness to answer your questions and the willingness to answer mine. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Before you go away, before you leave the podium, we have a small present for you all to thank you very much for being involved. And these are specially branded chocolates, which all
BACI
have
chocolates.
sugar in them.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Gavin, and thank you all very much for staying.
So thanks very much for everyone for staying the distance with us. I think it's been a wonderful opportunity once again for some really good open conversations and some conversation starters. So let's not leave the conversation there, let's continue the conversations around these things. I have an announcement for the winner of the poster competition. Krishna, would you like to come down? I think you'll agree with me that all of the poster presenters did a really great job in summarising all that information and bringing it to everyone in a really interesting and engaging way. And I think that was really good. I think it's also part of the communication piece that we were talking about there a moment ago. We worked with these for many hours, no, it wasn't that many, but some hours, about how to present what is the impact, what are you trying to do, and trying to deliver that to that audience. And I think that's really important that we look at all of those. And I think I'll I'd like to give this to Christian and thank you very much. So in wrapping up, it has been said a couple of times that there have been, oh, thank you. No, a lot of the work's not done by the people up on the stage. A lot of the work is done by the people in the background. One of those people who really drove it very heavily was Kirsten Vonhoff. So Kirsten, could you come up, please? We have some flowers for you. With the flowers. And it wasn't only Kirsten, she was the general, but we had lots of others. The Ruse that have been running the microphones around the room. Liz has been in the background doing a lot of the communication. I'd like to thank everyone for their really hard work that they've actually put into that today to make it what we think is a really good annual event which we would like to continue. So thank you once again. Enjoy your evening, and hopefully we'll see you back here in 2025.